Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. In this short tutorial, I'm going to give you a simple navigational tour of the SQL environment. So double-click your workstation and log on to your SQL Server instance here. And then let's just make it full mode. And there we are. A couple of things you'll notice here on the Windows 2000 Server environment right here. You'll see this folder obviously, and then if you hover to the bottom left, you'll see the start menu come up, and then just left click it. Obviously you can see that SQL Server 2012 has been installed, and one of the things I like to do is pin some of these icons. For example, SQL Management Studio, just right click it and say pin to taskbar. That's one of the things I like to do. Same thing with the administrative tool, right click, pin, right click the control panel. This way from our desktop it'll be easier to navigate. And same thing with Task Manager, pin to this. And you can certainly select your own, the SQL Server configuration will become handy, so we can pin that. The SQL Server data tools, that's good also for integration when we cover that. And another one is the reporting services when we cover that also, so that's going to be important. And I think about it, but you can certainly select which one you want. Now if we go back to desktop, you'll see that all these icons have been pasted here for easy convenience. So now that we've got this here, let's start SQL Server. So single click or double click the SQL icon, and the SQL Server will start. Obviously, the first splash window you'll see here is connect to the server, and you have several types here. As I noted, as I informed you earlier, that when you're installing SQL Server, you have four primary engines: the database engine, the analysis engine, the reporting engine, and the integration engine. And this is where you can connect to them. For our purposes, obviously, we haven't spoken about analysis, reporting, or integration, so we'll leave it to database engine. The other thing to note is if I look at this drop-down list here, right now, obviously, I only have one instance of SQL installed, and that's as server 3. If I had multiple instances installed on this server, then I can certainly go to Browse, click on the database engine, and I would see multiple instances of SQL. And an instance is a self-contained SQL Server. So if I had to reinstall SQL Server here, I can. And then you would see, for example, if I named it SQL Server 4, you would see this and have the option here. So since we only have one, we're going to go select that and go OK. Regarding authentication mode, earlier when we installed SQL previously in the previous videos, you have the options of choosing authentication modes being Windows authentication or SQL. We left it to default to SQL to Windows administration. Therefore, we do not have a login here yet. So we cannot connect to the server using the SQL Server authentication, but I'll show you how to do that in the later video. So let's just go back to Windows authentication, and obviously it will default to the key person that started this, and that's me. So that's the SQL administrator. So obviously when you connect, now obviously the first pane you will see here is what's called the Object Explorer. And as you can see, it's we're connected to the database, to the server called Server 3. This little icon indicates green, so it should be green. That means it's connected. If it's red, that means you are not connected to the server, and you may have to refresh it or right-click, disconnect, and then we can connect from here, choose Database Engine, and do the whole process again, and then obviously connect it. One thing to note here, obviously the service, the Object Explorer here, is pinned down. And what I mean by that is this is a little pin that auto hides. If I check this pin, you'll see it auto hides. But if I hover over it, it comes back. And if I move away from it, it'll go to the side. So it gives you a little more room to play with when you have the new query here. So click on this and pin it. The other thing you'll note about the Object Explorer pane is that you can move it. So left click here, and you can drag it, and you can place it anywhere you wish. If you prefer it here, that's fine. If in the middle, whatever. So it's a good opportunity. Most people obviously leave it as default, and that's what I'm going to do, but that's entirely up to you also. Obviously you can expand this and contract it. So that's one of the things you note. The other things to note is obviously from here you can see that the workstation, the virtual workstation, is kind of hovering over here, so you can unpin it and it will disappear onto this top. Obviously if you hover over it with your mouse, it'll bring it back, and if you can pin it again. So that's a little thing that helps if it's interfering in these options here. The other thing to note obviously is the query pane. And so to generate a new query, you can click on new query or Control N. So double or single click it. And obviously this is where you'll be doing most of your work. About 95% of your work obviously is done here in this particular environment, the SSMS or Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. And this is where you will be writing the actual scripts that allows you to manipulate the data and the server itself. One thing I like to do is, for example, let's collect this. If I'm writing against a database and I need a query, I personally prefer, rather than just clicking a query here, to actually go to the database, such as the test admin, right click and go new query. This way, this connection here is made to that database. For example, if I go here and I go here and go system, for example, if I change this to default, and now if I create a new query, you'll notice that if I hover over here, that this actually is connected to the master database, this query, and not to the test admin. So that's one of the, I like that, but that's a personal preference. The other thing to note, obviously, is obviously this is a collapsible tree here, and I'll just go over briefly what you'll be looking at in this tree. So if we expand the databases, obviously you'll get both the system databases and the user-defined databases. And if I expand the system databases, there are 4 default system databases, which we'll be talking about in the next video in more detail. But these are added by default, and they're absolutely needed for the SQL Server start. Certainly the master is. This obviously is a test database. A user-defined database, meaning we created it, the user created it, and I created this one. One thing you'll notice here is that as you create other databases, these self-contained databases contains these objects, and they're virtually identical to each database. So if I were to create another database, for example, new, and let's just call this test2, and just go OK, you'll notice that they have the identical objects in terms of database diagram, table, views, and so on. Obviously, as you add more tables to specific databases, then obviously that distinguishes each database from itself. But these are self-contained databases with its own security and so on. So obviously these are the databases, and we'll be discussing that. If you click on the security folder here, you can see that we have the logins here, we have the server roles, and these are all built-in server roles. We have the ability to audit, which we will be doing in other videos. And let me collapse a few more. Obviously, if when we talk about replication, this is where replication is going to occur. Always-on availability is a great solution for redundancy and high availability, and we'll be talking about that in the 5th, 6th course. And obviously here now you have the SQL Server agent. And its primary function is to manage jobs here, alerts, operators, and so on. So again, we'll be talking about each of these objects in more detail as we talk about other administrative duties and responsibilities. And we'll be talking about in detail. But that's what basically I wanted to show you here. A couple other things here. I don't know if I told you this, but if this suddenly disappears and you figure out how to get it back, just go to View, Object Explorer, or obviously you could press the function key F8 and it'll come back. The other things obviously is Tools. Obviously it allows you to start the SQL Server Profiler from here, the data DTA, the Database Tuning Advisor from here, and so on. And you can obviously look at some of the options if you want to change some of the settings here. And I'll let you scroll through these options. That's it, I think. So this is the interface that, as I said, you'll be using most often, and this is where you actually manage the entire server or servers from this environment. And so you'll become very familiar with this in time. So I'll leave it there, and this is Raphael with how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video. So let's do this here, unpin this, and there we go.